New Hush bucks are upon us from McFarlane Toys, and instead of just simply doing another review on them, I figured, you know what, let's do something a little spicier. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the ultimate Batman Hush Buck ranking tier list. And I truly do mean spicy because there's a very likely chance that the comments are going to be divided on this. And as such, I feel like I need to put out the disclaimer that this is going to be a rather subjective tier list. Even though I am open to discussions, I'm open to having an awful lot of takes and opinions in the comment section below because that's one of the more anticipated things I have about my videos. Regardless of whether they are in the negative or positive side, I always look forward to getting comments. I've never done one of these before, and since there are 6 Hush Bucks, 6 Hush molds that are out there in the wild as of right now in 2023, I figured let's do a standard tier rating from the lowest being, of course, F to S rank tier, because obviously that's how it goes. F, D, C, B, A, and then S rank. Or 1 through 6 if you want to go for that style of ranking. It really depends on you. But we got these 6 Hush molds here, and I'm going to be ranking them from my least favorite, or arguably the worst, to my personal favorite. And there may be some surprises along the way. Let's get started with the one that I'm obviously going to put in F ranking. Yep, it's going to be the very first release, and arguably the worst release, and that's going to be the buck that came with the Hush 2-pack. I think it was a Target exclusive, and very quickly went to clearance. Yeah, this is the obvious one that I'm obviously going to look at and go, this is where an awful lot of the chinks in the armor were kind of gotten out of the way, because so many different things were wrong with this specific mold. A lot of people liked an awful lot of the way that the sculpting of the body and the paint applications were utilized, but there were some major no-nos made with this figure, from the blackened out elbow joints that just look very awful, and especially the way that the gauntlets just kind of bleed on over to the high midway point here of the arm. But then you have the screaming head, and then the fact that the only way to access this figure is by buying that 2-pack. So you end up with a Hush figure that you probably weren't even planning on buying. You got these really rinky-dink accessories and diorama pieces that feel a little cheap. They look kind of cool, especially with the right lighting if you're very experience with photography and lighting and making sure that you get that perfect shot. But if you're not, you're just kind of left with a lot of pieces kind of off to the wayside. And then you get these really dorky looking batarangs. It's, in my opinion, I've always hated when batarangs are thrown in with certain Batman figures that don't even look like bats. They just kind of look like little wingtips, and they're kind of smoothed out. Plus, I remember seeing so many people kind of mention this a little bit, that sometimes it feels like the assembly just feels kind of cheap, which is really ironic considering this is all the same body mold, and yet this is the guy that has that feel like it was just kind of strung together at the last second and it was kind of rushed out of production. I don't know, there was something about the way that the plastic just feels in hand, especially with the little smudging and the little tearing happening here on the shoulder side. But yeah, just so many different little qualities about this version of Batman that easily makes them probably the most expendable. It makes it very easy for him to be the F tier pick. Right above him, however, is going to be my D tier, which is the newly released Batman and Batraptor set from GameStop. It's going to be this specific buck that is modeled after the Batman Who Laughs portrayal of Batman that is sporting that vehicle. And I just recently covered this guy in a short, and it's pretty much what you expect him to be, that exact mold that now happens to be bundled with the Batraptor, which was also previously released, except this time both of them come with this navy blue kind of aesthetic. Now, as I mentioned in that short, I really do like the color palette utilized for this specific Batman. I like the muted gray, the muted yellowish kind of brown tint to the utility belt, and then specifically the blue used on pretty much everything else. The gauntlets, the boots, the underwear, the cowl, and I even really do dig those red pupils utilized. It's a very nice change of pace for the white. But they use the screaming head again. We do not like the screaming head because it just feels just so static and just downright ugly. So there's technically some improvements from that Hush 2-pack, but they're still utilizing this ugly head sculpt, and it's technically speaking locked behind GameStop exclusivity, and you have to buy it at the $50 price tag in order to get it because it still comes bundled with that Batraptor. And should you be someone who's not really interested in those vehicles, this is the only way to really get him. So it would have been awesome if maybe he was like a singular release, but There's an awful lot of red tape, you could say. And on top of that, he doesn't really come with any other accessories apart from the Bat Raptor. You could argue that that's where most of that utilization of plastic and cost goes to, but no extra hands and furthermore, no base or cards. So there's an awful lot of discrepancies that make this definitely better than the Hush 2-pack version, but still an easy D tier ranking. In C tier is going to be a little bit of a twist. And even though we do get to some more favorable options, and I guess you could argue subjective options, I'm actually going to give C tier to another new release, and that's going to be the black and gray singular release that's also part of the Batman Hush kind of extrapolation. Only this time, this is pretty much this guy, except so many different things have been fixed. You have the much more neutral face. You have the yellow on his belt, a little bit more muted and kind of leans more towards the green hue. But oddly enough, it actually kind of fits the overall look of this guy. The black with the gray. A very straightforward black, very straightforward gray. You could almost argue it's the same, except you could see that maybe they took their time during production because it just looks a lot cleaner. It doesn't feel the actual quality of plastic and the assembly, even though it's the same sculpt, it just feels much more solid and put together than this original version did. Even the cape feels a little bit more straightforward and less rubbery. It has less splotches. It has a lot more of a cleaner surface to every bit of plastic and rubber used in the overall ensemble. And to me, just the face sculpt just looks so badass. Having the black, but at the same time having a much more static look to the face plate, as well as not having, like I said, very solid paintwork and not having any splotches or anything that just feels like it was just pumped out there. So it made it just a little bit of a surprise to me that McFarlane has been relatively quiet with this release. It's just kind of been released out there. Sure, they made a big hubbub when it was first revealed as far as social media, the photos, and all that stuff. But in terms of actual release, they haven't said, oh, it's rolling out to retailers now, or, you know, it's shipping now. I didn't really see anything like that happening. It just started to show up in certain places, whether it be shops, comic book shops, collectible shops, things like that. And then, of course, directly shipping from McFarlane themselves. You just get auto notices on that. But aside from that, you have pretty much the same body sculpt, except it just feels much more perfected. And furthermore, you don't have the black joints. You actually have rightfully painted gauntlets right there just below the elbow joint. And unlike the original Hush 2-pack version, you got really well sculpted and accurately painted batarangs as well as alternate hands that are not only just black, but you also have one of them sporting the kryptonite ring. So it's pretty cool that it still manages to retain the included accessories that are rightfully belonging to this Hush buck, and everything just feels fixed. But that's the reason for why I put it in the C tier right in the middle of the road, is because this figure mainly only exists because this figure screwed up so badly. It wasn't like oh, let's set out to do something perfect. No, they just kind of took this, listened to the feedback, and said, okay, let's just fix all that. Let's just go with the neutral head. Let's paint the elbows accurately, and then there you go. If it wasn't for those screw-ups in the first place, we technically really wouldn't have this figure. So that's why I kind of put it in that middle road area, and to me, feels perfectly at home in C tier. So that means that with this last three, we're going to start to get into some spicy territory. And I need to reiterate, some subjective spicy territory. Whether or not you agree or disagree with me, that's okay. So, going into B tier, ranking number 3, will have to be... Okay, yeah, I'm gonna put Two-Face above the prior 3. Two-Face as Batman. And the only reason why he's not much higher, if you take me higher, is because of the fact that he is very much a gimmick figure. And I'm totally self-aware that he's a gimmick figure. What if Two-Face as Batman? What if a Penguin as Batman? What if so-and-so as Batman? Like, yeah, it gets kind of tiring after a while to see McFarlane do that kind of stuff. A Jokerized Joker. Yo, man, that meme always cracks me up. Yo, I heard you like Joker, so I Jokerize your Joker so you can Joker while you Joker. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know why I crack up every time I think of that meme. But this is kind of in that similar vein where they just took the Hush Buck and put this brand new head sculpt and said, look, it's Two-Face as Batman. But I'm like, you just repainted the Hush Buck. I can see it. I definitely saw it when I picked up the figure. And so the color scheming, sure, it's supposed to go on that gimmick of it being Two-Face with the duality of black on red, red on black. To me, honestly, especially from afar, it makes him look a little bit more like what if Harley Quinn was Batman instead of the other way around. However, just like I mentioned in that shorts review, which you can check out on the channel, it was actually seeing him in person that two things really struck a chord with me and made me pick him up and actually play around with him. One would have to be the detail on his face. Even though all they did was just take the Hush Buck and put this head sculpt on it, the head sculpt is actually pretty dope. I really do dig the pointed ears, but then furthermore, I love the burnt effect on the ugly side of the Two-Face head sculpt. So that really worked with me. I really love the added detail of the coin actually being sculpted into his hand, even though there's a part of me that kind of wishes that the coin was loose as a loose accessory. But two things. One, I would have lost it very easily. And two, that little extra workforce that went into accessories went into not just one additional pair, but two additional pairs of hands. So you get 6 hands total. In my opinion, the first time I've seen any of the Hush molds actually tackle that. Yeah, we have some extra hands for some of the prior entries in this tier ranking, but this is the only one that comes with 6 hands. 3 pairs of hands total, and I didn't really see any of them really do that. And even though I was puzzled to see that Two-Face's Batman was the one they did it with, still, there's quite a bit of value there, and for the static price of $20, I'm a sucker for a figure that gives you the value of added accessories so that you can pose them in different ways and get a variety of extra shots and cool looks to him. And so therefore, that's my argument. That's my fighting point as to why it is that Two-Face ranks pretty high even in B tier. Alright, so here's where I'm probably going to make some enemies or some friends or neither. In A tier, which I need to remind you is still a great tier, it's second best, but that's might just not be good enough for some folks, is going to be, I can see an awful lot of you already clicking off the video. It's going to be the blue and gray Hush Batman here. Because even though it checks the box for an awful lot of collectors out there, a lot of McFarlane collectors, as the definitive Batman, it very much is the Hush mold again. And I'm trying to divorce myself from the fatigue I was having with the Hush mold by this point, but I will admit that if someone were to ask me what's a definitive Jim Lee Batman, it definitely would be this guy, because his color scheming definitely works better than the other ones that utilize an awful lot of these parts, including the neutral face, better than the black and gray over there, and even better than some of the other ones that are kind of in between right here. I really do like the way that the blue could have easily looked kind of goofy here in real life, you could say, in quotes, but it definitely works well with the much more muted gray and then the muted green that was very similar to that of the black and gray, except it's even darker than that. Combined with the appropriate accessories of the added hands, one of them sporting the kryptonite ring, the batarangs that are now black instead of the silver ones like the black and gray. I think I said black, but those are actually silver for him. Yeah, he's very much the definitive Batman, and in my opinion, he's definitely checking an awful lot of really great boxes. It's just that, like I said, by this point, I was already kind of getting fed up with this buck, but at least they were able to perfect so many different things, and the color scheming really does work to make him, like I said, when you think of Jim Lee Batman, and if you want to get him in McFarlane toy form, this is the guy to get, especially at the standard $20 price. And that's why, to me, I'm like, all right, yeah, if I was to take any of these guys without any gimmicks, without any, special little doodads or whatever, little twists on the character, all kidding aside, this is the definitive Batman. That's why he's an A tier. That's why he's second best. But from a subjective point of view, that brings us to S tier. In my opinion, ranking at number 1, the Walmart exclusive gold label Vampire Batman. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker, no pun intended, for figures that are able to really play up to their strengths. If you're gonna go for a gimmick, make it big, make it good. and I love the zombie look. I'm also a little bit of a horror fan, so whenever there's some kind of collectible, some kind of action figure that is really able to nail what it's really aspiring to be, which is meant to kind of give off that horror aesthetic, especially after having Halloween happen just so recently, Vampire Batman is definitely able to check all those boxes for me personally. Not only is it a clever use of the Hush Buck, but you have this color scheme that just looks so, I almost want to say decadent, with the dark kind of brown. It's almost like a chocolate brown. Plus, it also kind of makes me a little bit hungry because I love chocolate. But you also have so many different great uses of the paint apps here, from the dark, like I said, brown chocolate look to where the gray usually is, the flat out brown for the utility belt, black, but then you have the utilization of dried out blood on his gloves and on that face sculpt with the bloody mouth, the teeth beautifully etched and sculpted inside of there, and then you have the glowing eyes. It's not just red eyes like that one over there, but it's actually got white pupils to make him look demonic. The cuts and gashes here on the forehead to make it look like he's been struck a couple of times and he is bleeding profusely. You could see a little bit of blood inside of there. I've already covered this on a separate review that is available on the channel right now, but there's just so many different little details that work in favor of this guy for me personally, that out of all of the uses of the Hush Buck, this is, in my opinion, my favorite. This is S tier. I hope that McFarlane does more things like this. I just hope that they don't make them Walmart exclusive, because yeah, I understand that certain retailers need exclusivity, but not Walmart. I'm sorry, I know that sounds stingy and almost kind of prejudice, you could argue, but not Walmart, all right? Walmart as a company and Walmart employees don't really care about stocking these things properly. Give them to fan channels like Entertainment Earth, Big Bad Toy Store, your own personal McFarlane Toy Store, even Amazon, I would argue. Just don't do Walmart, please. Just hunting this guy was a bitch. But frankly, all these months later, he was worth it. And that rounds up our tier list for our current lineup of Batman Hush molds from McFarlane Toys. So let's go down the line here real quick. At number 6, or F tier completely, is obviously going to be the Hush 2-pack version with the open face. In D tier, we have the recently released GameStop exclusive Batman with the Batraptor from Batman Who Laughs. Then at number 3, another newly released McFarlane, and that's going to be the black and gray variant, only with an awful lot of corrections that definitely put him a little higher. But then we get into B tier, which is going to be the Two-Face as Batman because of the accessories. At A tier, second best, is the definitive Jim Lee blue and gray Batman. But for me personally, at number 1, S tier, is the Vampire Batman, because of how clever and creative McFarlane was able to utilize the horror theme, the horror aesthetic, and bring Vampire Batman to life with the blood that actually looks like legitimately dried out blood. I hate it when blood on figures looks too red, too poppy, it just doesn't look right. And here, that's pretty damn convincing. I love the smudging, I just can't get over the figure, and for me, he feels right at home in that tier, in S tier. But that's just my personal ranking. Now comes my favorite part. I want to hear your guys' ranking amongst the currently released Hush molds. Go down to the comment section, let me know what are your guys' rankings for the currently released Hush Bucks for 2023, because Lord knows that there's a really strong chance that McFarlane is going to release some more, at least one or two sporadically, and who knows, maybe this tier ranking will change later down the line. Maybe a part 2, maybe a 2.0 version of the list will get made at some point or another. But for the time being, I want to hear your guys' tier rankings down in the comment section below. If you guys enjoyed this tier ranking list of these molds, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button. If not, hit the thumbs down. And as always, guys, stay humble. I'll see you guys on the next one.